All right, let's start. So, my name is Alex, and I will be talking about hacking random things. So, I have done lots of different things, and my have a number of hobbies. And I started as a open source database consultant. I've been doing MySQL consulting for many years. I started MySQL AB, company behind MySQL. I developed an interest in Internet of Things, and maybe 4 or 5 years ago, at this conference, I presented Internet connector, a connected toaster, which can make a toast for you. And I was actually fixing so-called bug number 2. And then sort of recently, like 5 years ago, I I acquired an interest in offensive security, in white hat hacking. And I started playing what is called Capture the Flag game, a security capture the flag game, and that amazed me. And I currently work for Amazon Web Services, doing red team engagements. But this talk I'm not presenting on behalf of Amazon Web Services. What I love about this conference and about this audience is that I can present random things. So in this talk, I will be talking about hacking. And I use this term in more broader term, right? So hacking is usually about getting an access and finding the vulnerabilities in different systems. I will use this term in more broader sense, like thinking outside the box. How can we find an unusual solution and use that? Or use the functionality that this system was not intended to. And what I will be talking about, I will be presenting 4 absolutely random stories. The stories that I did. And this is the quick overview of the stories. So first of all, I will be talking about hacking printers. Why do we want to hack printers? What's the goal? What's the idea? The second is hacking internet access. So imagine you end up with a server which have no outbound internet connection. And your goal as a pen tester or white hat hacker is to send the information outside of that server. The third story is about hacking the network, the home network, home local network. I actually was too lazy to lay down the cables at my house, and I found another way how to reuse the existing cables. And finally, a more, I would say, controversial topic is how to hack rules and regulation. So basically, I was thinking, is there like a specific phrase, keyword, that will allow you to be above the rules? And what I will be doing is because this is random stories, they're all about hacking and finding the unusual ways. What I would like to do is at the end of every story, I will open the questions, maybe a couple minutes for you all to ask question about this, and then I will proceed with the next story. So let's start with the printer. So we usually think about the printer is to print the documents, but the modern printers are smart ones. This is a smart device. So it has a full-fledged computer inside. So I have this one at my house, Canon. It's MFU, multifunctional unit. So it can print, it can scan, it can send fax, and stuff like that. The question is, can it be hacked? And usually we think about hacking computers, laptops, and stuff like that. We also know that Internet of Things can be hacked. Why printer? If a bad actor, someone with bad intent, will be able to access and be inside this printer, then there are two things that this person can do. The first thing is that obviously it can access all the documents that are being printed, scanned, or faxed. And the second thing is this thing is usually inside the local network. So if someone will be able to get inside the printer itself, it will open the possibility to hack other computers because they are in a local network with this printer. So I was thinking, and we have started to evaluate how this can be done and what we want to do. So this thing can also play simple music. So our goal to try to hack this printer will be to turn it into a simple music box. What you can do with this? How would you approach hacking a printer? Usually, actually, this is recently there has been a common theme, and there's a a hacker contest called Hack in the Box, which will encourage you to hack the printers. But the usual approach of that is to find something inside the printer itself. Something like buffer overflow or something similar to that. So what is interesting about this, most of these devices, they have web interface. And this web interface is usually protected by the username and password or a PIN. Imagine that this thing is being exposed to the internet. The problem with this is that this thing is actually usually protected by something very simple, like a PIN code. And PIN code is like 4 digits or something like that. So we started looking into the web interface and started to see if we can actually get, bypassing the authentication. Actually, that was very interesting. Poking around with the JavaScript inside this page, right? You open a source code, you see the JavaScript, and this is Canon. This is a Japanese company. All comments are in Japanese. So you're trying to think and trying to find out what this piece of code is doing. And then you take this comment and you put it in a Google Translate, and the Google Translate say, "We will fix this later." So that gave me some ideas, right? So what to look for. So here's the plan of attack. First of all, we want to enable web interface. Usually it's not actually enabled by default on the printer. And again, we want to focus on remote hacking, remote access of that printer, right? Because if you have physical access to the printer, there's game over. It's not interesting, right? So you cannot expect that even the web interface is enabled. But what is interesting about the Canon multifunctional units, MFUs, right? They have an internal proprietary protocol, and they have a network port associated with it. It's called CADM port. So this port can actually be used to enable, to force enable the web interface on the printer. When you have the web interface enabled, you need to find a way to bypass authentication. When you bypass authentication, usually that's all you need. But finally, you need to find a way how you can turn this printer into a musical box. So you need to play the music on start. Unfortunately, I cannot share the details of number 1 and number 2. We found a way, we submitted CVEs to Canon, but we cannot share the details of number 1 and number 2. I can tell about number 3. So basically, inside the printer, there is a way to execute the code. The printer itself has the Lua interpreter. And with the Lua interpreter, you can program it. So to create the proof, right, we call it proof of concept, right, security proof of concept. To create a proof, we uploaded the music. And basically what it does is that it plays the music on a beeper device, and then when you start the printer, it will start playing your music. It's basically a demonstration. Imagine that instead of playing music, we can do various things. Lua language is actually pretty powerful. You have the network, you have the file writing capabilities. So basically, if this will be a bad actor, instead of playing music, they could have set up something that will allow them to read the files, intercept the printed documents, and send it over to the outside. So this is the story number 1. I will take maybe 1 or 2 questions if anyone have one. Any questions? Yes.
How responsive was Canon to you finding the authentication bypass?
So it took about, well, we filed it, and it took about 3 months to create a patch, and we haven't verified the patch yet. So. All right, so let's go next. Oh, first of all, takeaway, right? So don't expose your printer to the internet. Never do that. Even if you create a really good password, don't do that. And also, like web interface is not the only thing that printer have. This printer, for example, listens to 5 different ports. So it has its own proprietary things that is potentially vulnerable. We don't know, but potentially. All right, so hacking the network. I was trying to find a good example for this. I actually mentioned that already. So imagine that this bad actor was able to hack your printer. But imagine that your network is super protected. And the bad actor will not able to send the outbound information. Yet another example. Let's imagine that we have a super secret company that developed a, I don't know, patent on a toothpaste, something ridiculous. And they want to protect that super secret corporate information. They set up a super secret server which is isolated from the network. Like, think about like air-gapped system or something like that. And then someone was able to get into the server, probably through the physical access. They have all the documents that are stored on the server, but they are sort of trapped because they cannot send it over. Maybe they can save it to external disk, I don't know. But the question is, if the server is super isolated, can we still establish the outbound connection, even if this outbound connection is protected by the firewall? So in reality, there is a possibility because there is a local DNS. And I don't know if you heard about this joke. It's always DNS, right? Always blame the DNS. So the local DNS is usually needed because everyone is nowadays is using the APIs, internal APIs. And those APIs are usually based off the host name. So you connect to the host name, you need HTTPS. To use the HTTPS, you need the host name. To use the host name, you need DNS. And DNS is funny because DNS will find its way and send the outbound connection. It needs a root server. And then it will connect, and will potentially, we can use the DNS to exfiltrate the data. So let's imagine that we have this secret formula of spirit, whatever, right, that is used in our toothpaste. What we can do with the DNS is that we can encode that information into a single string, let's say base 64 or something better, like we encode it, we encrypt it. And then what we do is we do the resolve of that host name. This host name doesn't exist, but it doesn't matter. Let's say you do ping. What will happen if you do ping? The first thing it will do, it will try to do a DNS resolve of the host name to find the IP address. This is non-existing host name. But what the DNS will do is it will do the queries, recursive queries, which will finally hit the hacker.org domain. And the hacker who controls this domain controls the zone of this domain. So whoever controls this hacker.org will receive this request and will get this encoded string. And this encoded string is the message. So this is called the DNS tunneling. And this is actually a known attack. It's used by attackers, right? It's used in an attack if you want to exit the enterprise network. So if your laptop is got compromised and the laptop is contained inside the network, then this DNS tunnel can be used by a hacker, by a bad actor, to send information over. And it uses recursive name servers. So this request will travel from one name server to another server until it will hit the hacker.org. So this is a powerful way. And if you consider, if you basically set up your servers and you limit the outbound connection, then don't forget about DNS. If you have your local DNS, you have internal IP address of the DNS, and the DNS is configured to do the recursive queries, it can be used in this attack. It can be used in DNS tunneling. So there is a handy tool if you want to try it. There are more robust tools that are usually used in so-called command and control systems, but this tool, DNSCat, is very simple, very easy. So what you do is register your domain, set up your zone that you control, and then install the server, and then install the client on the victim machine, right, on the machine that you want to control from the internet. So this will allow you to do the stealth remote control for some server or some machine. So Again, there is a different way. Even if your server is protected, the DNS can provide DNS tunneling and can poke a huge security hole from outbound. All right, so any questions on that story? Yes.
If you have your own DNS server, is there a legitimate reason to have recursive queries on, or is there a way to mitigate it other than having like a firewall rule for known bad domains?
So the question is there a way to mitigate if you allow it, right? It's tricky. I mean, you need to, or the question is, sorry, I haven't got that. Or the question is there reason to allow this? Okay. We live in the world where everyone uses cloud. So if it's secret server, you should not do any outbound connections, of course, but in the real world, even the secret server may need to communicate with outside the world on this particular host name and this particular IP address. So if you need to do that, then basically you say, oh, this is the server outside, I control, no one will be able to access that. But that will require to allow the actual name resolves, right? So that's why it's easy to make this mistake and just open the DNS to allow the recursive queries. Or you may need to validate the certificates, and you're using the real domain names. If you're using the real domain names in your network, then you have to do that as well. All right. For example, if you want to use the real certificates and you don't want to run your certificate of authority, you have to do this, pretty much. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right. All right, so the next story is about hacking home network. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to set up a home network. And I was too lazy. I don't want to lay down the cables, the proper way of doing this local network. And usually, if you're too lazy like me, then there are a couple ways. The first obvious way is Wi-Fi. The problem with the Wi-Fi is that I have thick walls, and we have 2 stories. So Wi-Fi never worked reliably for me. So actually what I wanted to do is I want to connect to 2 floors. I want to connect the second floor to the local network which I already had on the first floor. The second option is there is a protocol called Ethernet over power line. And I actually tried to use that. I used that before. It's horrible. It's unreliable and it's slow. So I was looking at some other options. And I found out that the whole house is wired with a coaxial cable, right, used for TV. And we don't use it. We don't use the cable TV. So I found out that there is an easy way to reconnect those cables to create the Ethernet over coaxial network. So what you need to do if you want to do this is you need to find the outside box, outside house box, and basically you need to create a one cable. Because in my case, I wanted to pretty much connect 2 local networks. on the bottom floor and on the second floor. Then I created just one cable that connects two floors by reconnecting and basically disconnecting these cables from the coaxial line because we don't use this service anymore, and connect them directly. And then the second thing I needed to do is I needed to have an adapter. So I bought an adapter. I bought two adapters, and basically I convert the coaxial network to Ethernet. I actually was surprised that it worked pretty well. I was able to buy this, but there are multiple options here to buy the adapters, converters. Right, I bought those adapters. It's point-to-point, so I connect the coaxial network and basically connected two local networks. The local network that is on the first floor is connected now to the local network that is on the top floor. And then I have the Wi-Fi point on the top floor as well, and I have the Wi-Fi point on the bottom floor. So that's basically it. So I use the existing cables. Many homes actually are cabled like that nowadays, and many people don't use this TV anymore. So that is an option. All right, any questions on that story?
Did you explore any like old phone line options and find anything?
No, I haven't. The phone line was an option, but I pretty much found the coaxial cabling before I explored that option. I don't know if it's actually doable or not.
Thank you.
And what's like the network performance like? Is the 1 gigabyte per second like? Is that what's advertised on the product, or is that what you actually?
So
get?
it advertised 2.5 gigabit. I measured that. It was very close to 1 gigabit on the network. I still don't understand why the latency was higher than I expected, but the bandwidth was pretty close to what is advertised.
I just had a little comment. For other people that are exploring this kind of thing, cable guys, a lot of times they don't carry like phone lines anymore. They just carry Ethernet, and they just cut off the unneeded pairs. Mm-hmm. So you may want to check your phone lines, because you may have Ethernet already in your walls.
Ah, that's interesting, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my house is pretty old though. It's from 60s.
Well, I used to be a cable guy, so
okay. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I would, instead of grabbing that, I would just have Ethernet in my van. And so if I needed to run a new line, it would just be Ethernet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can just pitch in a little bit on this. I'm using this at home, the Mocha adapters, and they do the 1 gig. They will also do 2.5 gig, and that's useful if you have several of those. They're not just point-to-point. You can actually have several of those on the same network, and you can have several streams going between different devices, so the kind of composite bandwidth can be much higher than 1 gig. Obviously, the Ethernet ports on the back of these are only 1 gig, so that's all you're going to get.
Exactly.
And another thing is I did also experience the high kind of round trip times, and in my case, that turned out to be a bad connection on one of the coax cables. I noticed that like if I bump it, the response time would shoot up. I think it's just trying to do air recovery or retransmit type of a situation, which was increasing that. When I tightened everything up, I was down to just a few milliseconds and very consistent 1 gig, basically up to the theoretical limit of 90-something% of that. So works well, very well.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't need to do the real network over that. I just need to connect two networks. But this is a good point. That can be used like that. Thank you.
One thing I remember from my old 10base2 coax networking days was that the unused ends needed to be terminated. Is that the case with the cable?
Not in this case. I just one line. There's no termination. I remember that termination, but you may have a better answer to that.
Yeah, so they do have, if you have multiple kind of connections going out, first of all, splitters, like if you want to have multiple rooms connected to the same common network type of deal, and you can have all the kind of coax, coming out of your bedrooms and whatever, you can wire all of these in a splitter, and those are specific to this Mocha protocol. They have certain impedances. I'm not exactly sure, but they differ slightly from the ones that you would get from your cable company. So you put that in, and if you have any cables going to a room that are not wired to anything, you want to put some sort of a terminator. Those are also available, I believe.
All right, thank you.
You have one more question back here.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, it is possible that you could just take the coax, use it as a pull string, and then pull your Cat 6 through there, Cat 5. So my house is 1959, really old, and the coax is not tacked down to any 2x4s. So I just rewired my house by using it as pull string. So.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that as well. The thing is that it will probably work, but my concern was that it's very weird, inside the wall with all these twists and stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely right. I was too lazy to do the manual work. That's why. Yeah, that's true. All right. So last story is very short, more on controversial topic of avoiding rules. So this is the well-known XKCD sandwich about sudo, right? So I wanted to see if there is a sudo-like phrase in the real world. If I can say something, sudo make me a sandwich, or sudo I am not bound to rules and regulations. And somehow this will work. So I have this backpack, a small backpack that I use everywhere. And it's really small, actually. And if you notice, there's a new policy on the concerts that don't allow the bags. And they allow the bags like this, but not like this. So I was thinking maybe I can say something like a sudo, like sudo, I can have this bag, and they will allow me to bring it on the concert because it's really inconvenient for me to go back to my car. And I found it. It's called for medical purposes. So I can say sudo. I can say for medical purposes may I have this bag, and it actually works. So it works on a concert. I haven't tried it in other places. It may not work in other places. But this is just a small, funny story about using sudo in the real world to avoid the rules and regulations. All right, so I think that's basically all I have, and I will open for the questions for last story and all the stories as well.
Have you run into issues with clear bag policies? So I've noticed concerts now, they don't only restrict size, but the bag has to be clear and not opaque.
Yeah, so this is another thing. Some of them require clear ones. Some of them require just small bags. This story, the sudo that I used was for just the size of the bag, not the clearness of the bag. I don't know, maybe it will work as well. They usually look inside, and there's nothing inside usually. So I haven't tried to use this phrase to avoiding the clear bag.
Do you ever put anything inside the bag to kind of go along that's vaguely medical?
I was thinking about this. So basically, and actually that's true. Sometimes I have a back pain, and when I found out when I wear it like this, it actually better. It eases the back pain. So it's actually a brace. It's a medical device. So see, it's a medical device. So I can use it.
Well, since this is about hacking, have you considered pointing the coax network in the other direction, seeing maybe there's something interesting coming from the cable company or something like that, if they're broadcasting anything?
I had that idea. I haven't tried that, but I was very interested to know what will happen in this case. Will it? I think they have. Probably you should have an answer, or someone in the audience have an answer. They should. I mean, they should filter that, right? It's so obvious. Does anyone know the answer to this? Well. Uh-huh.
Clear QAM.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions?
So for your DNS tunneling topic, I missed the part on what you, in the beginning of that topic, you were discussing air-gapped systems and how, and then I heard DNS tunneling can be used to overcome that. I think air-gapped systems, I don't see how that works. Can you re-elaborate what that overcomes?
No. Air-gapped system was probably not a very good example in this particular case, right? That's not an air-gapped system. This is a system that is configured with a local firewall, right? Like this, right? But we still have the local firewall will prohibit the outbound TCP connections from that server only. So if you placed on that server, you cannot do a reverse shell, you cannot send the information out, you cannot wget, you cannot whatever, right? Just an example. No outbound connection. Egress basically is prohibited. But you have a local network. And this local network includes the DNS server. And DNS server can talk to another DNS server through the local communication. And that DNS server can talk to another DNS server. And finally, there is a DNS server that has the TCP UDP 53 outbound access to be able to resolve to connect to root servers pretty much. So through the recursive queries, you can hit the outbound as a transport.
Okay.
Does it make sense? Does it explain?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
With the internet running over the coax, is that converting it to RF at both ends?
That I don't know.
Okay. Somebody said yes.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
I was wondering what kind of a bit rate you could get with exfiltrating via DNS, and does DNSCat reassemble hunks of data on the other end from the logs?
Right, so DNSCat is interesting. It can operate as a beacon. So basically, we have this concept of command and control. You have a vulnerable system that you own, like a hacker owns, right? And then it beacons to your command and control system using the DNS tunneling as a transport. So it sits there, and then every so often it will send just one DNS request. So it knows that it's alive. Now, if you want to connect to it, it can actually provide you a shell access, a reverse type shell access through this. So you can choose whatever system you want to access, you want to connect to that, and then you run your commands. Amazingly fast for that slow, protocol. Amazingly fast. So it's like maybe less than a second latency on response on that. So
Thank you.
To kind of piggyback on that a little bit, I've seen some situations where just to egress a bunch of data, the data to be exfilled has been encoded to base 64 as the request type, or as the request record. And so by sending that request off to whatever hacker.org destination, it can decode it on the opposite side and then just start storing whatever requests that come in.
Yep.
So if you happen to see base 64 encoded data, for most TCP-style DNS, it could be up to 4096 bytes, which is a fair chunk of data. So if you see that in your logs, maybe decode it and see what's there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, thank you. All right, any other questions? Well, looks like no. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for presenting those random stories.